The wind swept through the narrow London street, carrying the chill of an evening that promised nothing but loneliness. Grace stood near a busy crosswalk, holding a cracked paper cup, her fingers trembling as she whispered softly, "Please, sir, anything will help. I haven't eaten all day." People hurried past without looking, suits, heels, umbrellas, all moving like a tide of indifference. In a city full of dreams, she was invisible. Her voice wavered again. "Please." No one slowed down. A businessman brushed past her, muttering under his breath, "Get a job." Grace bit her lip, her chest tightening. She was only 26, but the streets had aged her faster than years could. Her clothes were thin, her shoes worn. Yet, behind the dirt and despair, there was still something dignified in her eyes, a quiet strength that refused to die. Then, amid the blur of footsteps, one man stopped. He wasn't like the others. He moved with calm authority, the kind that didn't come from arrogance, but from control. A black coat brushed against his legs, and the light from a passing taxi caught his face. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to read more than they should. Grace noticed him, but quickly looked away. Rich men sometimes mock the poor for sport. She had learned that lesson too many times. The man's voice was steady when he spoke. "What's your name?" Grace hesitated. Her voice was small, but clear. "Grace." He nodded slowly. "I'm Brian." There was a strange stillness between them, broken only by the noise of the traffic. Grace expected him to toss a few coins and walk away, but he didn't. He kept watching her, as though trying to understand something deeper. "Why are you here?" he asked. Grace gave a faint, bitter laugh. "Because I have nothing, sir. No home, no family. I beg because it's the only way I can survive." Brian's face softened, but his tone remained calm. "How much do you really need?" Grace blinked. It wasn't the kind of question beggars usually got. People gave out of pity, not curiosity. "How much?" she repeated quietly. "I don't know, enough to eat. Enough to start over." Brian tilted his head slightly. "So a lot then?" Her lips trembled. "Yes, enough to change my life." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, respect. He liked her honesty. Then he said something that made Grace's heart stop. "If you truly want to change your life, be my girlfriend. For 1 month." Grace froze. "What?" He didn't flinch. "You heard me. Be my girlfriend for 1 month." She stared at him in disbelief. "Is this some kind of joke?" Brian shook his head. "No. My family is hosting a major celebration in Paris next month. Every one of my brothers is expected to bring someone home. My mother, she doesn't take no for an answer. I need someone to play the part. Just for a month." Grace blinked rapidly, unsure if he was serious. "You want me, a woman who begs on the street, to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Brian's lips curved faintly. "Exactly. Because you have nothing to gain except what I give you. You're not after my money or status. You just want a chance. That's what makes you perfect." Grace's heart pounded. "And if someone finds out? If your family knows I'm not who I claim to be?" "They won't," Brian said firmly. "You'll act as Grace Thompson, daughter of a wealthy London businessman. Confident, elegant, the kind of woman my mother approves of." Grace's breath caught. "I can't pretend to be something I'm not." "You can," Brian replied. "You just need to believe it for 30 days. After that, you'll have enough money to build a new life." She stared at him for a long time, torn between fear and temptation. Finally, she whispered, "And if I fail?" Brian's gaze didn't waver. "Then you walk away. No harm done. But if you succeed, you'll never have to beg again." Silence hung between them, heavy with uncertainty. Then Grace nodded slowly. "All right, if you pay me well, deal." A faint smile crossed Brian's face. "Tomorrow morning, you'll come to this address." He scribbled something on a folded card and handed it to her. As she reached for it, her hand brushed against his, firm, warm, assured. For the first time in months, she felt the strange flicker of hope. But just as he turned to leave, a cruel, mocking laugh broke the moment. Grace's chest tightened. She recognized that voice instantly. Well, it said. If it isn't Grace Carter. She turned sharply, and there he was. Liam, her ex-boyfriend. The same man who had once promised her forever, then left when her world fell apart. He stood with his arm around Clara, a tall, elegant woman dressed in a long beige coat and diamond earrings that caught every streetlight. Grace froze. The pain in her chest returned like a wave. Still begging. Liam smirked, loud enough for people nearby to hear. London's finest street performer. A few people glanced their way. Grace's face burned with humiliation. "Liam," she said quietly, "you don't have to do this." He laughed. "Do what? Remind you of reality? Look at you, Grace. Dirty clothes, shaking hands, and that pathetic cup. You could have been beside me if you'd listened, but you chose pride." Grace clenched her fists. "You left me because I lost everything, not because I changed." Liam shrugged. "I left because you had nothing to offer. I needed a woman who could help me climb, not one who drags me down." Clara smiled wickedly. "He's right, darling. Men like Liam don't settle for beggars." Grace looked at them both, her eyes steady, her voice trembling but strong. "You think wealth makes you better? You left because you're weak. Because you can't handle a woman who refuses to break. A man who leaves when life gets hard isn't ambitious, he's a coward." Liam's grin faded, but Grace wasn't finished. "And you, Clara," she said, stepping closer. "Don't laugh too loud. The same man who left me will leave you the moment someone richer walks by. Betrayal is his second language." Clara's smile faltered. Liam stiffened. Grace's voice dropped low, each word steady as stone. "One day, you'll both remember this moment. And when that day comes, you'll realize the woman you mocked was the one who survived." Then she turned and walked away, slow, proud, her back straight against the night. Inside, her heart was breaking, but her spirit refused to bend. She whispered to herself, "I may be poor today, but this is not how my story ends." That night, the rain began to fall, soft, steady, cold. Grace found a corner near a closed cafe, laid a piece of cardboard on the pavement, and curled up beneath her torn jacket. She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Tomorrow, she was to step into a life she didn't belong to. A stranger's world, Brian's world. And though she didn't know it yet, that decision would change everything. The next morning, the London sky was gray and heavy with mist. Grace woke to the sound of footsteps and car horns. For a moment, she forgot where she was, the cold pavement beneath her, the wet cardboard at her side. Then the memory of last night returned. Brian, the stranger who had offered her a deal that didn't feel real. She sat up, the small card he'd given her still clutched tightly in her palm. The ink had smudged slightly from the rain, but the address was still legible. Rosewood Hill, Kensington. She'd never been near that part of London. People there didn't walk, they arrived. Grace looked down at her worn shoes, her damp jacket. "What am I doing?" she whispered. "This is madness." But she had no one left to stop her. So, she gathered her courage and began to walk. It took her nearly an hour to reach the gates of Rosewood Hill. The contrast hit her like a dream she wasn't meant to enter. Polished black gates with golden initials HW, trimmed hedges, fountains that danced in the morning light, and a stone driveway, so clean it reflected the sky. Grace stood frozen for a moment, her breath caught between fear and awe. Then she saw him. Brian stood at the entrance, dressed in a dark coat and scarf, his posture relaxed yet commanding. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "You came." Grace nodded hesitantly. "I said I would." He walked closer, studying her quietly. Her clothes were simple, her hair still damp from the fog, yet there was something striking about her, raw and unfiltered. "You look nervous," he said. "I am," she admitted. "I don't belong here." Brian's voice softened. "You will. But first, you need to clean up. I've arranged everything." Grace followed him through the gates. The driveway curved toward a grand white mansion, its large glass doors glimmering under the pale sunlight. When she stepped inside, she gasped. The floor was marble. The chandelier above looked like a floating constellation. Every detail, from the scent of fresh roses to the quiet hum of distant music, whispered wealth. "This is," Grace paused. "Heaven." Brian smiled slightly. "It's just home." But before she could reply, The sound of heels clicked sharply across the marble floor. A woman appeared from the far end of the hallway, tall, elegant, her blonde hair tied neatly, her perfume lingering before she even spoke. Brian. Her tone was calm, but edged with frost. What is she doing here? Grace stiffened instantly. The woman's gaze swept over her like a blade. Who is she? Brian's eyes hardened slightly. Vanessa, what are you doing here? Vanessa lifted an eyebrow. Your mother told me you'd be bringing someone soon. I thought I'd see for myself who she is. She turned her attention fully to Grace, her lips curving into a faint smirk. A street charity case? Interesting choice. Grace's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. Brian's voice cut through the air, calm but commanding. Watch your tone, Vanessa. You have no right to be here. Vanessa laughed softly. No right. Please, Brian. We've known each other for years. You and I both know your mother adores me. I came to help her see reason before you embarrass this family. Leave, Brian said simply. Her laughter faded, replaced with cold anger. You think you can throw me away that easily? After everything we shared, I didn't throw you away, he replied. You did that yourself when you betrayed my trust. Grace turned her head slightly, her eyes darting between them. She didn't understand everything, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Vanessa took a step closer, her voice dropping. One day, you'll regret this, Brian. You'll realize she's nothing like me. She doesn't know your world. And when she breaks, don't come running back. Brian's eyes didn't move. You should go before I make a call you'll regret. Vanessa glared, her jaw tight, then turned sharply and stormed out, her heels echoing like gunshots through the hall. When she was gone, silence filled the space again. Grace exhaled slowly. Who was that? Brian rubbed a hand over his face. Someone from the past. Someone who doesn't matter anymore. Grace nodded, unsure what to say. Her world had been the street. His was a maze of money and politics. But even in her confusion, one thing felt certain. She was stepping into a story far bigger than herself. A few hours later, after a shower and new clothes, Grace barely recognized the reflection in the mirror. The makeup artist had done wonders, her brown hair styled into soft curls, her old jacket replaced with an elegant cream blouse and tailored skirt. She looked like someone who belonged in this mansion. But when she stared into her own eyes, she saw fear. I don't know how to act like them, she whispered to her reflection. Brian appeared behind her in the doorway, his voice steady. You don't have to. Just be confident. My mother values grace, no pun intended, and poise. Speak slowly, smile when she does, and never look away. If you get nervous, just hold my hand. I'll handle the rest. Grace turned, her heart pounding. What if she asks about my family? Then you'll tell her your father is a businessman who owns properties abroad, Brian replied. Don't worry. I've filled in the details. Just remember your story, and you'll be fine. She nodded, taking a deep breath. Okay, let's do this. The living room was vast, lined with portraits and expensive furniture that seemed untouched by time. Seated on a high-backed chair was Mrs. Howard, Brian's mother, elegant, commanding, and as precise as a painting. Her eyes flicked up as they entered. Mother, Brian said, leading Grace forward. Meet Grace Thompson, my girlfriend. Grace lowered her head slightly. Good afternoon, ma'am. Mrs. Howard's gaze scanned her from head to toe, calculating. Then, to Grace's shock, a warm smile spread across her face. Oh, my dear, she said, taking Grace's hand. You are absolutely lovely. Finally, Brian brings home someone who looks refined. Tell me, where is your family from? Grace swallowed hard. My father is in property development. He has companies in Zurich and Geneva. We live abroad most of the time, but I've recently come back to London. Mrs. Howard's face lit up. Zurich. How charming. I've always admired families who keep international ties. You must travel often. Grace forced a small laugh, her palms sweating. Sometimes, yes. Mostly for business and charity events. Brian's mother beamed. You have wonderful composure, my dear. You're nothing like those socialite girls who think gossip is a profession. I like you already. Brian smiled subtly beside Grace, his hand brushing hers under the table, a quiet sign of reassurance. As the conversation continued, Grace followed his lead, answering politely and pretending to be part of the wealthy world she had only ever watched from a distance. By the end of the meeting, Mrs. Howard was charmed. "Brian," she said proudly, "don't let this one go. She's perfect." Grace smiled weakly, relief flooding her chest. But as soon as Mrs. Howard left for the kitchen, her composure cracked. She turned to Brian, whispering, "I lied to your mother. Every word. My hands are still shaking." Brian smiled gently. "You did great. She believed you. Take a walk in the garden, get some air. You've earned it." Grace nodded and slipped out of the room, her heart still racing. Outside, the air was crisp, the garden stretching out in colors of autumn gold. She closed her eyes, finally breathing again. But when she opened them, she froze. Standing near the gate was Clara, Liam's new girlfriend, the same woman who had mocked her on the street. Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "You," she gasped. Grace's stomach dropped. "What are you doing here?" Grace asked quietly. Clara laughed sharply. "What am I doing here? This is my aunt's house. Mrs. Howard is my mother's sister. The question is, what are you doing here, dressed like a socialite? Don't tell me you've tricked Brian into thinking you're one of us." Grace's heart pounded. "You don't need to know anything about me." Clara stepped closer, her eyes glinting with cruelty. "Oh, but I do. I saw you begging in the streets, remember? Holding that pathetic cup, crying for coins. And now you're here, pretending to be rich. What a joke." Grace took a shaky breath, forcing calm. "You can think whatever you want. Brian knows who I am." Clara smirked. "Does his mother know? Because I'm going to tell her everything." Grace's face drained of color. "You wouldn't." Clara smiled wider. "Watch me." And before Grace could move, she spun on her heels and marched toward the mansion, her voice sharp and determined. Grace's body trembled. The walls she had just built were about to crumble. She whispered, her voice breaking in the quiet wind, "God, what do I do now?" The sound of Clara's heels echoed sharply across the marble floor as she marched into the mansion. Her eyes burned with pride and vengeance. Mrs. Howard was still in the kitchen, instructing a maid on how to serve tea, when Clara burst through the doorway. "Aunt Catherine," she called, her voice trembling with mock urgency. Mrs. Howard turned, startled. "Clara? What is it, dear? You look upset." Clara took a dramatic breath. "It's about that woman, Grace. Brian's so-called girlfriend." Mrs. Howard frowned slightly. "What about her?" "She's a lovely young woman." Clara's lips curled. "Lovely? Aunt, she's a liar. She's not from any wealthy family. She's not even middle class. That girl is a fraud, a street beggar." Mrs. Howard blinked, her smile fading. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Clara stepped closer. "I saw her with my own eyes. Just 2 days ago, near Oxford Street, begging for food with a cracked paper cup. I even saw her ex-boyfriend mocking her on the street. She's pretending to be rich just to use Brian for his money." At that exact moment, Grace entered from the garden, her face pale and her heart pounding. "Clara, stop this," she said shakily. Mrs. Howard's head turned sharply. "Is this true?" Grace froze. The room felt colder. Clara crossed her arms smugly. "Go on, Grace. Tell her who you really are." Mrs. Howard's tone grew sharper. "Answer me, young lady. Who are you really?" Grace's throat felt tight. She wanted to lie again, to protect herself, but the guilt pressed too heavy on her chest. Finally, she lowered her gaze and whispered, "It's true. I'm not from a rich family. I was begging. On the street." The silence that followed was deafening. The air felt thick enough to choke on. Mrs. Howard's face changed, shock, then anger, then disgust. "You deceived me? You came into my home with lies. How dare you?" Tears filled Grace's eyes. "Ma'am, please. I didn't mean to deceive you. I just wanted a chance, just one chance to live differently." Mrs. Howard's voice rose, trembling with rage. "A chance? You call lying and pretending a chance? You made a fool of me in my own house." "Aunt Catherine," Clara added sweetly, "I told you. These people will do anything for money." "Enough, Clara," Mrs. Howard snapped, though her fury didn't fade. She turned back to Grace. "I want you out of this house. Right now. And don't you ever come near my son again. Do you hear me? Ever. Grace's lip quivered. Please, just let me explain. Out. The word struck her like a slap. Grace's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. She turned toward the door, her steps heavy and hollow. As she passed Clara, the woman whispered with satisfaction, I told you it wouldn't last, street girl. Grace didn't respond. She didn't have the strength. She just walked out, one step after another, until the cold air outside hit her face again. Brian returned an hour later, his mood light from a meeting, until he saw the look on his mother's face. Where's Grace? He asked. Mrs. Howard's lips pressed into a thin line. Gone. Brian's brow furrowed. Gone? What do you mean, gone? I sent her away. He blinked in disbelief. You did what? Mrs. Howard stood straighter. Brian, that girl is a liar. Clara told me everything. She's not from any rich family. She's a beggar, a woman from the streets pretending to be something she's not. I will not allow that kind of person to shame our family. For a moment, Brian just stared at her, unable to speak. Then his voice dropped, quiet but deadly calm. You chased her away without even asking me? I was protecting you, Mrs. Howard replied sharply. She's beneath you. She would have destroyed your reputation. Something dark flickered in Brian's eyes. So because she's poor, she's unworthy? Is that it? She lied, and you think you didn't force her to? Brian shot back. You and everyone like you, judging worth by status, forcing people to pretend just to be treated like humans. Mrs. Howard's face stiffened. Brian, mind your tone. But he wasn't finished. She may be poor, but she's worth more than every fake, shallow woman who only loves money. You talk about class, mother, but you've shown none. Brian. No, he said firmly, stepping closer. You hurt her. You judged her without even trying to understand her heart. Clara, who had been eavesdropping near the stairs, crossed her arms and smiled faintly. But when Brian turned to her, his expression made her freeze. And you, he said coldly, you think you've done something clever? I pity you, Clara. The man you stole from Grace, Liam, he'll betray you too. Because betrayal is the only thing he's loyal to. Her smirk faltered instantly. What are you talking about? Brian didn't answer. He just grabbed his coat. I'm going to find her. And if you can't accept her, mother, he said, voice shaking with restrained anger, then you'll have to learn to live without me. Mrs. Howard's mouth opened, but he was already gone. Outside, the city lights flickered like restless stars. Grace walked along the quiet streets, her small bag clutched to her chest, tears staining her face. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't go back. When a car slowed beside her, she froze. Then she heard his voice. Grace. She turned, her heart skipping. Brian stepped out of the car, the cold wind tugging at his coat. Where are you going? Her voice cracked. I don't know. Away from here. Away from this lie. Your mother was right. I don't belong in your world. He took a step closer. Stop saying that. It's true, she said, her eyes glistening. I'm nothing, Brian. I begged on the streets. I lied to your family. And I've humiliated you. I should have never come. Brian's expression softened. He reached out, his voice breaking through the night. You think I care about that? Grace, from the first moment I saw you, something changed in me. I thought it was pity, but it wasn't. It was love. Grace froze. What? I love you, Brian said simply. I love you for your strength, for your honesty, for your fire. I love that you fought back when life crushed you. I love the woman you are, not the one you pretended to be. Tears filled her eyes again. But your mother will never accept me. Then she'll lose me, he whispered. Because I can't lose you. Grace shook her head, trembling. Brian, I'm scared. I've never been loved like this before. I don't know how to handle it. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear. Then let me show you. I don't want 1 month anymore, Grace. I want forever. For a long moment, they just stood there, two broken hearts finding home in each other. And when she finally nodded through her tears, he smiled. Then it settled. You're not leaving me again. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if the world could end and he wouldn't care. The sound of the city faded, replaced by the beating of two hearts that had found each other against every odd. The next morning, the Howard mansion was silent. Too silent. Mrs. Howard sat at the breakfast table, her cup of tea untouched, her gaze fixed on the open newspaper, but she hadn't read a word. The echo of Brian's voice from last night still haunted her. Then you'll have to learn to live without me. She'd raised him to be strong, decisive, and proud, but she hadn't expected those qualities to be turned against her. At that same moment, Brian was driving through the foggy edges of the city with Grace beside him. Her head rested against the window, watching the wet streets flash by. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Grace whispered, "You shouldn't have argued with your mother for me." Brian glanced at her. She was wrong. She's your family. And you are, too, he said softly. At least, I want you to be. Grace turned to look at him, her heart tightening. You don't even know half my story. Then tell me, he said. She hesitated, fingers twisting together. I wasn't always on the street. My father owned a small shop in Manchester. He died when I was 19. My mother followed a year later. I came to London with dreams I couldn't afford. Jobs didn't last. Rent got higher, and friends vanished when the money ran out. The streets became the only place that didn't reject me. Brian listened silently. Her voice was steady, but behind it, he could hear the echo of every lonely night she'd survived. When she finished, he said quietly, "You're still standing. That's all that matters." Grace looked down, blinking away the emotion. Most people don't see it that way. I'm not most people. When they returned to Rosewood Hill, Grace felt a chill run through her. The mansion looked different now, not as beautiful, not as safe. The memory of being thrown out lingered in every corner. Brian parked the car and turned to her. You're staying here. This is your home now. She hesitated. Your mother. I'll deal with her. As they stepped inside, Mrs. Howard was waiting in the foyer. Her expression was unreadable. Brian straightened, his voice calm but firm. Mother, we need to talk. Her eyes shifted to Grace, and for a moment, silence cut through the air. Finally, Mrs. Howard spoke. I see you brought her back. Yes, Brian said. Because she belongs here. Mrs. Howard's jaw tightened. Brian, listen to me. You're young and emotional. You don't understand the damage this can cause. That girl. Her name is Grace. He interrupted gently but firmly. Mrs. Howard drew a sharp breath. Fine. Grace. She lied to this family. She humiliated me in my own home. You expect me to welcome her back as if nothing happened? Yes, Brian said. Because her intentions were pure. She did what she did to survive. You, of all people, should understand that. Mrs. Howard frowned. And what's that supposed to mean? Brian met her gaze. You came from nothing too, Mother. Father told me how you worked in a village bakery before he found you. You were judged by the same kind of people you've now become. Her face paled slightly, but she said nothing. Brian stepped closer. Don't make the same mistake they did. Don't let pride blind you to a good heart. Mrs. Howard's lips trembled slightly. You sound just like your father. Then maybe that's not such a bad thing, Brian said quietly. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was thick, but Grace could feel something shifting. Not forgiveness, not yet, but hesitation. Finally, Mrs. Howard sighed and looked away. Fine, she can stay. But if she embarrasses this family again, she's gone for good. Brian exhaled in relief. That's all I ask. Grace whispered, Thank you, ma'am. Mrs. Howard didn't answer, but Grace thought she saw a flicker of something, curiosity, maybe even guilt, in the woman's eyes. That evening, Grace wandered through the quiet garden. The fountain glowed under the soft lights, and the air smelled faintly of roses. She closed her eyes, finally letting herself breathe. But her peace didn't last long. From behind, a familiar voice spoke, smooth and venomous. Well, if it isn't the street girl who refuses to leave. Grace turned sharply. Vanessa, dressed in a black coat, her hair tied back, she leaned against a stone pillar like she owned the place. Grace's stomach tightened. What are you doing here? Vanessa smiled faintly. I came to collect what's mine. What's yours? Brian. Grace's heart sank. He doesn't love you, Vanessa. Vanessa laughed softly. You really believe that? You think a man like Brian, raised in wealth, groomed for power, will throw all that away for a girl who used to sleep on cardboard? Grace took a deep breath. Love doesn't ask for permission. Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume thick and suffocating. Let me tell you a truth, darling. In our world, love bends to status. Power always wins. You're nothing but a temporary rebellion, something he'll tire of once reality kicks in. Grace met her gaze without flinching. Maybe, but for now, I have something you don't, his heart. For the first time, Vanessa's smile faltered. Her jaw tightened, but Grace didn't look away. You had him once, Grace said quietly, and you lost him. Not because of me, but because you valued appearances over love. Vanessa's voice dropped to a hiss. Enjoy it while it lasts. You'll fall, and when you do, I'll be there to watch. Then she turned and disappeared into the night, her heels clicking like warning bells. Grace stood there for a long time, her chest heavy but her spirit unbroken. Later that night, Brian found her sitting near the fountain, staring at the reflection of the moon in the water. He walked over quietly. You okay? Grace gave a weak smile. Your ex paid me a visit. He frowned instantly. Vanessa? She nodded. She thinks I don't belong here. Maybe she's right. Brian crouched beside her. Grace, look at me. She turned, her eyes tired. You belong wherever you choose to stand, he said softly. You've already survived what would have broken others. Don't let anyone, not my ex, not my mother, not society, make you believe you're less than them. Her eyes welled up. Why are you so sure about me? He smiled faintly. Because I've seen enough fakes to recognize something real when it's standing in front of me. Grace laughed weakly through her tears. You're not making this easy to walk away from, you know. Good, he whispered, brushing her hair gently. Because I don't want you to. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. Grace's breath caught. Brian, what are you? He opened it, a delicate silver necklace with a single sapphire pendant. Not a proposal, he said softly. Just a promise. To remind you that even if the world doubts you, I never will. Grace stared at it, her hands trembling. It's beautiful. He smiled. It's yours. She hesitated, then whispered. Brian, this world of yours is full of things I don't understand. But one thing I know, I've never met anyone like you. He fastened the necklace around her neck, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin. Then he said, and I've never needed anyone the way I need you. The garden lights flickered softly as she turned toward him, their eyes meeting, two worlds colliding, yet somehow fitting perfectly together. And somewhere inside the house, behind the curtains, Mrs. Howard stood watching. Her face was unreadable, torn between fear of scandal and the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, this love was real. Paris, 2 weeks later. The sky was pale blue over the Champs-Élysées, but Clara's mind was far from calm. She walked through the luxury shopping district, her heels clicking sharply against the polished stones, her phone pressed to her ear. Liam, where are you? She asked, irritation slicing through her voice. The line crackled for a moment before his familiar, smooth tone answered. Just out for a business meeting, love. Don't worry, I'll be home soon. Clara rolled her eyes. You've been saying that all week. Every time I call, you're either in a meeting or at some mysterious dinner. If you're seeing someone else. Liam chuckled lightly. You're being paranoid again. You know I'm building something big for us. Trust me. Trust, she said bitterly. That's a dangerous word coming from you. He laughed again. Come on, Clara. I'm not that man anymore. I left that street life behind. But as he spoke, he sat in a quiet cafe miles away, not with business partners, but with a woman whose hand he held tenderly across the table. Her name was Elena, and her soft, rounded belly was impossible to ignore. She was pregnant, 5 months along. Liam leaned closer to her, lowering his voice. Just be patient, okay? Once I get the money from Clara, we'll be free. We'll move to Spain. Nobody will find us there. Elena's eyes softened. Are you sure she won't find out? Liam smirked. Please. Clara's a fool. She thinks I love her. She's just a bank account in heels. Elena giggled nervously. You're terrible. I'm smart, he said. She used to mock Grace for being poor, remember? She'll soon learn that karma wears expensive shoes. He raised his cup in a mock toast. To easy money and new beginnings. That evening, Clara finished her shopping and decided to stop by her favorite restaurant near Montparnasse for a drink. The place was quiet, warm, familiar. As she entered, she paused, her eyes narrowing. A familiar voice carried from a far corner. Liam's. She turned slowly, and there he was, laughing, leaning close to a woman whose hand rested on her belly. Clara's heart dropped to her stomach. She froze in place, her breath quickening. Liam's words drifted across the room. Once I empty her account, we'll start a new life. She'll never see it coming. The woman giggled softly. You're wicked. Clara's vision blurred. Empty her account? Her chest tightened. She gripped the side of a chair, her knuckles white. The room began to spin, but she forced herself to stay still, to listen. Liam continued, his tone cold and amused. She's too easy. I tell her I love her, and she melts. These rich girls always think they can buy loyalty. But once her money's gone, so am I. The woman laughed again, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. Clara's breath came out in a shaky whisper. He used me. Her vision clouded with tears. Every word, every kiss, every promise, all of it had been a lie. Her mind replayed Grace's voice from that night on the street. The same man who left me will leave you the moment he finds someone richer. And now it was happening. She stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a waiter, and rushed outside into the cold Paris night. Her heart pounded in her chest, rage mixing with heartbreak until she could barely breathe. She leaned against the wall, gasping. No, I won't let him win. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat in her hotel suite with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights. Her reflection in the window looked unfamiliar. Eyes red, makeup smudged, but something sharper had awakened in her gaze. Liam, she whispered, you wanted a game. Fine, let's play. Her fingers tightened around the glass until it shattered. The next evening, she waited outside Liam's apartment. She had done her research. She knew his schedule, his habits, even his favorite pizza delivery brand, the one he ordered from every Friday night. When the delivery man arrived, she stepped out of the shadows, her long coat flowing behind her. Excuse me, she said, her tone calm, almost polite. That order's for Mr. Liam Carter, yes? The man nodded, confused. Yes, miss. Apartment 4C. She smiled faintly, slipping an envelope of cash into his hand. Do me a favor, she said softly. Add this packet to the pizza. It's just seasoning, a special request. Tell him it's from me. The delivery man hesitated. Ma'am, I'm not supposed to. Double that amount, Clara said, her voice cold. Agreed one. The man nodded quickly and took the envelope. Clara turned away, her heart pounding. Her mind screamed that she was crossing a line, but her pain silenced it. She whispered to herself, he took my heart. I'll take everything else. That night, Liam and Elena laughed together in the small apartment. Pizza night, Liam said cheerfully, opening the box. They ate, talked, and dreamed of the life they thought was coming. But minutes later, Elena's laughter turned to a cough. Liam frowned. What's wrong? She clutched her stomach, gasping. He reached for her, but then his chest tightened too. His throat burned. He fell to his knees, his vision blurring. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was the open pizza box on the table. By morning, the news spread fast. 2 dead, a young man and a pregnant woman, found in a Paris apartment. Police investigations began immediately. It didn't take long. The delivery man was caught, and under pressure, he confessed everything. He mentioned the woman with the British accent and the long black coat who had bribed him, Clara Benson. When police arrived at her hotel, she didn't resist. She just sat there, staring blankly at the wall as they cuffed her wrists. The detective read her rights, but her mind was somewhere else, replaying Liam's laughter in that restaurant. Weeks later, in a Paris courtroom, the judge's gavel struck the wood with a sound that echoed like finality. Clara Benson, he said sternly, You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Liam Carter and his partner, Elena Moreau." The courtroom fell silent. Clara's body trembled, but no tears came. She had cried them all. The guards led her away, her heels clicking one last time, a cruel reminder of the woman she used to be. And as the doors closed behind her, the same sentence echoed in her mind, over and over. "The same man who left me will leave you." Grace had been right all along. Back in London, Grace stood by the mansion window, reading the morning headlines. "Heiress sentenced for poisoning lover in Paris." Her fingers tightened around the paper. She remembered the way Clara had mocked her, the way she'd laughed when Grace was thrown out. Now she felt no triumph, only pity. Brian entered the room quietly, wrapping his arms around her. "She destroyed herself," he murmured. Grace nodded. "Revenge doesn't heal. It only burns everything left." He kissed the side of her head gently. "That's why you're different. You were hurt, too, but you never turned bitter." She looked up at him with a faint smile. "Maybe because I finally found something worth healing for." Brian smiled softly. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that." It was a quiet Sunday morning at Rosewood Hill. For the first time in weeks, peace seemed to settle over the mansion. The garden was alive with the scent of blooming roses, and the sound of soft music floated from the living room. Grace stood near the window, sunlight glimmering through her hair, watching the world outside with a calm that felt almost foreign. Brian had gone for a morning meeting, leaving her alone with the household staff, who now treated her with a mix of curiosity and quiet respect. For once, she felt safe. Then, without warning, the rumble of an engine broke the stillness. A sleek black car rolled up the driveway. The guards straightened instantly. Grace turned from the window, frowning. When the door opened, Mrs. Howard froze mid-step. Her teacup clattered onto the saucer. "Dear God," she whispered. "He's home." From the car stepped a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. Mr. Henry Howard, Brian's father. He had been abroad for nearly a year, recovering from a heart condition in Switzerland. His sudden return sent a shockwave through the house. Mrs. Howard rushed toward him. "Darling, you should have told me you were coming. We would have prepared." He raised a hand, smiling faintly. "Surprises are still allowed in my own house, Catherine." His voice carried warmth, but there was strength beneath it, the tone of a man who was used to being obeyed. Then his gaze shifted and landed on Grace, who stood uncertainly near the doorway. "And who," he asked, "is this?" Mrs. Howard hesitated, her smile faltering. "Ah, that's Grace." Brian's father tilted his head slightly. "Grace." Before she could answer, Brian entered through the main door, his steps hurried but confident. "Father." Mr. Howard's expression softened. "My son." They embraced briefly, a rare moment of affection in a family often ruled by pride. When they parted, Henry's eyes flicked back to Grace. "Now, tell me who this lovely young woman is." Brian didn't hesitate. "She's the woman I love." The air seemed to shift instantly. Mrs. Howard stiffened. "Brian, please." But her husband raised a brow, intrigued. "Love, you say? I see." He turned to Grace. "Come, my dear. Sit with us. I'd like to hear how you managed to steal my son's heart. Something even money couldn't do." They gathered in the sunroom. The air was warm, filled with the scent of lavender tea and the faint chirp of birds outside. Grace sat nervously, her hands folded in her lap. Mr. Howard leaned back in his chair, watching her with calm curiosity. "So, Grace," he began gently, "tell me about yourself." Mrs. Howard fidgeted. "Henry, perhaps we shouldn't." He held up a hand. "Catherine, let the girl speak." Grace hesitated, then drew in a breath. "There isn't much to tell, sir. I didn't come from wealth. I used to work in a shop in Manchester, but things fell apart after my parents died. I came to London looking for a better life, but it didn't go as planned. When Brian met me, I was at my lowest." Mrs. Howard's eyes dropped. Henry studied her quietly. "And yet, here you are, speaking with grace and courage. That takes strength." "Thank you, sir," she said softly. Brian reached for her hand, squeezing it lightly. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Mrs. Howard looked away, her guilt deepening. Henry turned to his wife. "You've met her before, haven't you?" Her lips parted, but no words came. He continued calmly. "I've heard enough whispers from the staff to know there was tension." Mrs. Howard sighed heavily. "She lied to us, Henry. She pretended to be from a rich family. I was humiliated." Henry's eyes narrowed. "And what made her feel she had to lie?" Mrs. Howard blinked. "Excuse me." He leaned forward. "Did it ever occur to you that maybe our arrogance gave her no choice? That maybe she knew the truth would close every door before she could even knock?" His wife looked down, her face pale. He continued, his tone softer now. "Catherine, where were you when I found you? Do you remember? You were serving tea in your father's bakery in a small village near Bristol. You had one pair of shoes and a dream you were too afraid to speak aloud." Her eyes glistened with tears. "I married you because I saw your heart," Henry said gently, "not your bank account. And now you've forgotten where you came from." Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. I didn't mean to hurt her." "Then fix it," he said. She turned to Grace, her voice trembling. "My dear, forgive me. I was wrong to judge you. I thought I was protecting my son, but I was only protecting my pride." Grace's throat tightened. "Mrs. Howard." The older woman reached for her hand. "Call me Catherine. Please. You deserve that much." Grace nodded, tears in her eyes. Brian smiled faintly, relief flooding his face. Mr. Howard leaned back, satisfied. "Now that that's settled," he said with a small grin, "I expect wedding invitations soon." "Father," Brian said, half laughing, half stunned, "we haven't even proposed properly." Henry chuckled. "Then what are you waiting for?" Mrs. Howard laughed softly through her tears. "He's right. Don't waste time, son." Grace blushed deeply, hiding her face. Brian turned to her, his voice playful but filled with warmth. "Well, you heard them. No escape now." She laughed lightly, her eyes shining. "You're impossible. Only for you," he said. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Grace stood on the mansion balcony, watching the golden light fade into the horizon. For the first time in years, she felt at peace, truly at peace. Brian joined her quietly, slipping his arm around her waist. "So my father loves you. My mother apologized. What's next?" Grace smiled. "Maybe we start believing this happiness is real." He turned her gently to face him. "It's real, Grace, and I intend to make sure it stays that way." She looked up at him, her heart full. "You sound like you're about to make a promise." He smiled. "Not yet, but soon." She leaned her head on his shoulder as the wind brushed past them. For once, the world felt right. Simple, safe, beautiful. Neither of them knew that tomorrow would bring the biggest twist of all. The next morning began like any other. Soft sunlight spilled into the mansion. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, and for once, laughter echoed down the halls. Brian was in the study, reviewing some project documents, while Grace sat with Mrs. Howard, helping her pick out designs for a charity event. It felt normal, almost too perfect. Then the knock came. Firm, polite, but carrying weight. A butler entered. "Madam, there's a gentleman at the door. He says it's urgent. He's asking for Miss Grace." Grace looked up, startled. "For me?" Mrs. Howard frowned slightly. "Who could it be?" Grace excused herself and walked to the entrance. As the butler opened the door, her world seemed to tilt. Standing there, tall and dignified in a gray coat, was Mr. Thompson, the same man she had once begged help from years ago, the man who had looked at her with guilt she couldn't understand. Only now, he didn't look like a stranger. He looked like a secret unraveling. "Grace," he said softly, his voice trembling. "It's time we talked." They sat in the garden. The autumn wind rustled through the hedges as she faced him across the small marble table. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said quietly. He nodded. "I didn't think I'd have to, until I saw your picture in the papers." She blinked. "The papers?" He smiled faintly. "Your engagement rumors are everywhere, my dear. The woman who captured Brian Howard's heart." She looked away, embarrassed. "It's not official. It doesn't matter. It brought me here." There was silence. Then she said softly, "Why? What do you want from me?" He exhaled slowly. Not what I want, what you deserve. The truth. Grace frowned. What truth? Mr. Thompson looked down for a moment, gathering himself. Then he met her eyes. Grace, I'm your father. The world stopped. Her breath caught in her chest. What? She whispered. He nodded, pain etched in every line of his face. It's true. You are my daughter. Grace shook her head, her voice breaking. No. My father died years ago. He cut in gently. The man who raised you, yes. He was good, kind, but not your real father. Your mother, she and I, we were young. She worked for my company then, as secretary. We loved each other, but my family didn't approve. I was engaged to another woman, the one who later became my wife. He looked away, his voice trembling. When your mother got pregnant, I wanted to be with her, but my father threatened to destroy her career. She chose to raise you alone to protect you from scandal. Grace stared at him, disbelief and pain mixing in her eyes. You're saying, you left us. I didn't want to, he whispered. I sent money. She never took it. She was proud, too proud. When I tried to see you, she disappeared. By the time I found her again, she was gone. Grace's eyes filled with tears. And you only decided to come now? After all this time? After I begged on the streets? His face broke. I saw you once, Grace. Years ago. I wanted to approach you, but you looked so angry, so broken. I thought you'd hate me. She stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. You thought right. He rose too, desperate. Please, Grace. Let me make it right. You're my daughter, the only family I have left. You don't have to struggle anymore. Grace's hands shook. I don't want your money. I wanted a father. He fell silent. The weight of her words sank deep. Brian, who had overheard part of the conversation from the hallway, stepped forward slowly. Grace turned, startled. Brian. He looked between them, confusion in his eyes. What's going on? Mr. Thompson sighed. Son, you should know. The woman you love isn't who you think she is. She's not poor, not by birth. She's my daughter. Brian's eyes widened. Your daughter? As in? Yes. My name is Charles Thompson, CEO of the Thompson Group. Brian blinked, stunned. That's one of the largest conglomerates in Europe. Grace covered her face. Please don't look at me like that. He stepped closer. Grace, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know, she cried. I grew up thinking my father died when I was 6. I didn't even know this man existed. Mr. Thompson's voice softened. She's telling the truth. She had no idea. Brian exhaled shakily, trying to process it all. So all this time, the woman everyone thought was a beggar was a Thompson. Mr. Howard's voice interrupted from behind. Everyone turned. Brian's parents stood at the doorway, having heard everything. Mr. Howard smiled faintly. Well, this is quite a revelation. Mrs. Howard's hand was over her mouth. Oh my God. Mr. Thompson stepped forward. I never intended for her to live that life. It's my guilt to carry. But please understand, she's not what you think. She's educated, strong, and kind. Everything her mother was. Mr. Howard extended a hand. We already see that. The only thing that changes now is that I owe you a proper introduction, Mr. Thompson. The two men shook hands. Grace stood there, trembling, overwhelmed. Brian reached for her hand. Hey, he said softly. None of this changes how I feel. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. How can you say that? I lied to you. You didn't lie, he said. You were lost, just like I was before I found you. And now I know why you always carried yourself with such quiet strength. Mr. Thompson's eyes softened at the sight of them. If I ever doubted who you are, I don't now. You're your mother's daughter, and mine. That evening, the Howards and Mr. Thompson sat together in the grand dining room. The atmosphere was oddly warm, filled with cautious laughter and the beginnings of understanding. Mrs. Howard raised a glass. To Grace, or should I say, Grace Thompson, for teaching us that true worth isn't measured by where we come from, but by how we rise. Everyone smiled, and glasses clinked. Grace looked around the table, at the faces that had once looked at her with judgment, and felt tears burn behind her eyes. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She belonged. Later that night, as everyone retired, Grace walked alone into the garden, the moonlight silver on her skin. Brian followed quietly, stopping beside her. "So," he said softly, "the woman I love turns out to be the daughter of one of Europe's richest men." She gave a small, bittersweet smile. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" He took her hand. "Only if you forget who you are. You're still Grace, the same woman who taught me what love means." She looked up at him. "And you're still the man who believed in me when no one else did." He smiled. "Then nothing's changed." She rested her head on his chest, whispering, "Everything's changed, but somehow it feels right." The revelation of Grace's true identity spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, the story was everywhere, from glossy magazine covers to breaking news banners. The beggar who was a billionaire's daughter. Grace Thompson, from streets to heirloom. Brian Howard and Grace Thompson, a love story beyond status. Photographers crowded outside Rosewood Hill. Reporters camped by the gates, calling out her name, their flashes bursting like lightning. Grace watched from the window, her heart heavy. "I never wanted this," she whispered. Brian came up behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Fame was never the plan, but the world loves stories like yours." She turned to him, anxiety flickering in her eyes. "Stories. That's what they think I am, a fairy tale. But I'm not. I'm just trying to live." He smiled faintly. "Then let's live. Together." But the days ahead were far from easy. The media followed her everywhere. Every outing turned into a headline, every gesture analyzed. When she smiled, Grace Thompson embraces new life. When she didn't, trouble in paradise. Even Mrs. Howard began to feel the pressure. "The attention is overwhelming," she admitted one morning. "Our home feels like a museum now." Mr. Thompson, protective but stern, began to step in. "Grace, I've assigned security for you," he said during breakfast. "And your name is now linked to the Thompson Group. You'll need to attend the press gala next week." Grace blinked. "Press gala?" "Yes," he said. "You'll officially be introduced as my daughter. It's important, not just for the company, but for your image." Brian frowned slightly. "Does she have to?" Mr. Thompson looked at him. "In our world, perception shapes everything, son. She's part of this legacy now." Grace forced a smile. "It's okay, Brian. Maybe it's time I stop hiding." But inside, she was afraid. Afraid of losing the quiet love she had built in exchange for a spotlight she never wanted. The night of the gala arrived. The event hall glittered under chandeliers, filled with Europe's most powerful families, investors, politicians, and media icons. Grace stepped out of the limousine in a sapphire blue gown that matched her eyes. Cameras flashed instantly, the crowd whispering her name. "Grace Thompson. She's stunning. Is that Brian Howard with her?" Brian stood beside her in a black tuxedo, his hand steady on hers. But even amid the noise, she leaned closer and whispered, "I feel like I can't breathe." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then just look at me." She did, and for a moment, the chaos faded. Inside, Mr. Thompson took the stage. He smiled proudly, his voice carrying warmth and strength. "Tonight," he said, "I stand before you not just as a businessman, but as a father, one who has been given a second chance. I present to you my daughter, Grace Thompson." The crowd erupted in applause. Grace took the stage beside him, smiling faintly as flashbulbs erupted. She gave a short speech, simple and heartfelt. "I've learned that life doesn't measure us by what we have, but by what we survive," she said softly. "For years, I thought I was lost. But I wasn't. I was being shaped, for this moment, for this purpose. And if I can rise, anyone can." The room went silent for a beat before a standing ovation swept through. Brian watched her from the audience, his heart swelling with pride. She wasn't just the girl he'd fallen for. She was a force now. But as the applause faded, whispers began too. "She's beautiful, but too raw. She's not like the rest of us. Do you think she'll fit into this world?" Grace heard them, every word. She smiled, but inside, the old insecurities clawed their way back. After the gala, as they walked through the quiet garden of the event hall, she finally broke the silence. They'll never see me as one of them. Brian turned to her. Who cares what they see? Everyone cares, she said, her voice trembling. This world runs on perception, Brian. They'll always remember who I used to be, the girl begging on the street. He stepped closer. Then let them. Because that girl was brave. She survived when others would have given up. That's who I fell in love with, not the billionaire's daughter, but the woman who refused to stay broken. Tears filled her eyes. What if I lose myself again? He touched her cheek. Then I'll remind you who you are. Every single time. She smiled weakly. You always say the right things. He chuckled softly. Only because I mean them. But love, no matter how strong, isn't immune to pressure. As weeks passed, their relationship began to feel the weight of the public eye. Every move was watched. Every word twisted. Brian started receiving calls from investors questioning his loyalty, some even suggesting that his success was now tied to Grace's name. His pride began to ache, though he tried to hide it. One evening, after a long day, he sat in his office staring at a newspaper headline. Grace Thompson, the power behind Brian Howard's rise. He clenched his jaw. When Grace entered, her smile faltered. You've been quiet lately. He looked up slowly. Just tired. She studied him for a moment. Is that all? He hesitated. Sometimes I wonder if they're right. Her heart sank. Right about what? He exhaled. About me. About how I look now, like a man living under your shadow. She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Brian, don't do this. Don't let them make you doubt who you are. You were someone before you met me, and you'll always be. He rubbed his temples. You don't understand. You belong here now. I'm just the man who followed you into the spotlight. Her eyes filled. Brian. He stood abruptly, pacing. Every time your name's mentioned, mine follows like a footnote. It's like the story has changed, and I'm just supporting cast. Grace's voice trembled. I never wanted that. I just wanted us. He stopped, his anger fading at the sound of her voice. I know. She walked to him, taking his hand. Then don't let them win. Don't let the world turn love into competition. He stared at her, then finally, slowly, nodded. You're right. She smiled faintly. I usually am. He laughed softly, pulling her into an embrace. I'm sorry. So am I, she whispered. That night, they stood together on the balcony of her father's estate, overlooking the glittering lights of London. The city hummed below them, restless and alive. Brian spoke quietly. You know, I used to think love was about perfection, but you've shown me it's about persistence. She smiled. And forgiveness. He nodded. And choosing each other, even when the world makes it hard. She leaned into him. Then let's keep choosing each other. He kissed her forehead. Always. The wind carried their promise into the night, soft and certain, a vow born not from fairy tales, but from the fire of everything they had survived. 3 years later, London had changed. So had Grace. The woman who once stood on cold pavements begging for bread now walked with quiet grace and certainty. She had become the head of Thompson Foundation for Hope, a global charity dedicated to helping the homeless and the forgotten. She spoke in conferences, met world leaders, and was named one of Europe's most influential women before the age of 30. But beneath all the accolades, she still carried the same soft heart, the one that once trembled in the rain, holding a cracked plastic cup. Brian, on the other hand, had built his own empire. Refusing to rely on the Thompson fortune, he had launched Howard Innovations, a tech startup that grew beyond anyone's expectations. He proved himself, not as the man in her shadow, but as the man who walked beside her. They lived together in a quiet countryside estate outside London, where mornings smelled of coffee and laughter, and nights were filled with stories and dreams whispered under soft lamplight. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, Grace stood on the balcony, watching the fading sun paint the sky in amber and rose. Brian stepped behind her, slipping his arms around her waist. Still thinking about tomorrow? He murmured. She smiled faintly. How can I not? The galas for the Foundation's new shelter project. It's the biggest thing we've done yet. He kissed her hair softly. You'll be amazing, as always. She turned, resting her forehead against his chest. I wish my mother could see this. He held her closer. She sees it, Grace. She's in everything you do. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let the peace of his words settle in her chest. Then, a light rain began to fall, gentle, rhythmic, familiar. Grace tilted her head up and smiled. "Do you remember the night we met?" she asked. He laughed. "Of course. You were standing by the roadside, looking ready to fight the whole world. And you," she teased, "looked like the kind of man who thought a suit could solve anything." He grinned. "It worked, didn't it?" She chuckled. "Barely." They laughed together, the kind of laughter that only two people who've survived storms together can share. The next night was the gala. The event was breathtaking. A grand hall filled with chandeliers, music, and faces from every corner of the world. Mr. and Mrs. Howard sat proudly near the front, while Mr. Thompson watched from the side, pride softening his once stern eyes. Grace stood on stage, looking radiant in a flowing white gown. When she began to speak, the room fell silent. 3 years ago, she said softly, I had nothing, not food, not shelter, not hope. But I had one thing that kept me alive, faith. Faith that kindness still existed, even in strangers. That love could find you even when you're too broken to believe in it. Today, I stand here not because I was born into privilege, but because someone looked beyond my scars and saw my soul. That love saved me, and it can save others, too. Her eyes met Brian's across the crowd, and for a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The applause that followed was thunderous, but she barely heard it. All she saw was him. After the event, as the guests began to leave, Brian took her hand quietly. Come with me, he whispered. He led her outside, through the candlelit garden behind the hall. The night air was cool, the moon bright. Grace laughed softly. Brian, where are we going? He stopped beside the old fountain, the same place where they'd shared one of their first moments of honesty years ago. He turned to her, eyes gentle but certain. Here, he said, is where everything began, where I promised I'd never let you walk away again. She smiled. And you never did. He took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth. Brian. He looked up at her, his voice trembling just slightly. I've loved you as a stranger, as a dream, as a storm I didn't know I needed. I've seen you fall, rise, and shine brighter than anyone. You've changed everything about me, the way I see love, the way I see life. So tonight, under the same stars that once watched us when we had nothing, I want to ask you, Grace Thompson, will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes instantly. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He smiled, sliding the ring onto her finger, a simple diamond, elegant and timeless. She threw her arms around him, laughter and tears mixing as the guests inside burst into quiet cheers, watching from the terrace. Mrs. Howard wiped a tear. She finally got her forever. Mr. Thompson nodded. She earned it. Months later, the wedding took place in the English countryside, a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by flowers, music, and sunlight. Grace walked down the aisle in lace and light, her smile radiant, her heart at peace. Brian stood waiting, eyes glistening with the same awe he felt the first day he saw her. When she reached him, he whispered, You're my miracle. And you, she said softly, are my home. Years passed. Their home filled with laughter, the sound of little feet, morning giggles, and bedtime stories whispered beneath warm blankets. Grace often found herself staring at their children and thinking of the girl she used to be, the one who once begged the world to see her. And now, the world did. Not because of her beauty or wealth, but because she proved that broken beginnings can still lead to beautiful endings. In the final scene, Grace sits by the window, years later, the rain falling softly outside, just like the day her story began. She opens a small box and pulls out the old cracked bowl she once used to beg with. It's worn, faded, but she keeps it as a reminder. Brian enters quietly, placing a blanket over her shoulders. Still holding on to that old thing? She smiles, her eyes glistening. It reminds me never to forget where I came from. He kisses her forehead. And where you're going? She looks at him, smiling softly. Wherever love leads. They share a quiet laugh as thunder rumbles in the distance, and the camera slowly pulls away. Their silhouettes framed by the golden light of home, a symbol that love, no matter how impossible it begins, always finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Every story we tell reminds us that love isn't about wealth or status. It's about seeing someone's soul when the world refuses to. Until next time, stay inspired.